Your Excellency, Ambassador, President Fisher, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here this evening. I'm Patrick Ryan, President of the Tennessee World Affairs Council, and I'd like to welcome you to what will be a terrific event. We have the great opportunity to learn about what has been probably the most important strategic relationship for the United States over the last 70 years. First, let me take care of one housekeeping chore. Since time is brief, I only say that the World Affairs Council, the Tennessee World Affairs Council, organizes important public affairs briefings like the one that you're at tonight. But it needs your support. You should know the Council is an independent, nonprofit, nonpartisan, strictly nonpartisan. We don't take political views, although obviously we have speakers and programs that do share their own points of view, but the Council is not pushing an agenda. It receives no funds from governments. It relies on you and others to contribute to make its global affairs awareness programs possible for the community. That includes not just town halls like this one, but also programs for high school students, college students, and other public affairs programs for the general public. I appreciate your attendance tonight and hope that you'll take a brochure available at the table in the back with you as you leave and consider becoming a member or a contributor to the World Affairs Council. In 1973, at the height of the Cold War, the conflict between the East and the West, I had the opportunity to serve in the U.S. Navy in the Middle East on the Middle East Force flagship in the Persian Gulf. At the time, it was sort of a backwater area for the U.S. Navy. Not too many ships went there. 1973, I was very young. They took us young age back then. On one of our Show the Flag port calls in the region, the ship participated in the Naval Festival in Massawa, Ethiopia. It's no longer Ethiopia, it now belongs to Eritrea. But it was basically a dusty Red Sea port where ships and sailors from the United Kingdom, France, India, Italy, and the Soviet Union gathered together to celebrate naval history. For several days, the sailors mixed it up. There were exchanges of visits from ships, parades, and occasionally sailors had festivities in a few of the drinking establishments in town. The bar scene from Star Wars would probably set the scene in your mind. The last night of the visit was very memorable. Sailors were sharing sea stories and swapping uniforms, and it was not uncommon to see an American sailor heading back to his ship wearing a British Navy jumper, a French belt, and perhaps a Russian hat. It was a once-in-a-lifetime experience of camaraderie among sailors and navies. In the years that followed, my Navy career took me to the Navy Submarine Force and later as an intelligence officer, where job number one for the U.S. Navy was to be aware of the capabilities of the Soviet Navy and be prepared to deter and fight that Navy if it came to it. In spite of these professional responsibilities, I remembered fondly the time I spent in Ethiopia with Russian sailors, just being people and getting to know one another and sharing that camaraderie and exchanging memorabilia and uniforms. I kind of wish I still had my Russian hat, but somewhere along the way it's disappeared. So tonight we have a chance to get to know something more about Russian-U.S. relations and perhaps put a human face to what we hear in the news about the relationship between the United States and Russia. To do that, we're privileged to have the top diplomat representing the Russian Federation in the United States, Ambassador Sergey Kislyak, on what we believe is the first visit of a Russian ambassador to Nashville. The ambassador will open remarks and engage in a conversation with Belmont's own, Dr. Mimi Barnard, who is the associate professor responsible for global initiatives, which, as you can see by the turnout tonight, Belmont is doing pretty well. That will be followed by your questions. In the interest of time, we ask that you write them down. We'll be circulating with note cards, so you can write your questions. Just indicate to somebody in the staff that you have a question, and we'll get those to the ambassador. And we'll get to as many of them as we can. Your program includes the ambassador's CV, but let me say that he is among Moscow's most seasoned and experienced distinguished diplomats. He has served in numerous posts earlier in his career at the UN in New York, and at the Russian Embassy in Washington. He has been Russia's ambassador to Belgium and the permanent representative to NATO. He has also served as Deputy Foreign Minister. He holds the diplomatic rank of Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary. I always wanted to say that in front of the audience. Please join me in welcoming His Excellency Sergey Kislyak, Ambassador of the Russian Federation to the United States.
First of all, I'm thrilled to be here. It's my first visit to DC, sitting to this wonderful university. When I go to speak to universities, Russians or Americans, and see so many young faces, I always think that I envy them. And most probably that's the best time in your life, because everything is still ahead of you. But they do not understand it. They will understand it in 40 years. It's a good chance for me to share with you some thoughts, and I'll try to be brief. I start each and every day by a collection of clips from American press on Russia that my junior assistants collect for me in the morning. And I will tell you, it's the most depressing reading one can imagine. And I mean it, especially for a Russian citizen, because there are a lot of things that we also criticize in Russia, and many things that are being critical of Russia are drawn from Russian press and repeated here. But I haven't found anything positive on this. Once I invited a number of correspondents and editors of major newspapers, and in the conversation I asked them, listen, why do you not publish at least a single article that is positive about Russia? I give you an example. You remember 10 years ago, 5 years ago, everybody was speaking about looming demographic catastrophe in Russia, that Russia is dying, that the number of people, citizens, is going down. We have broken this tendency. For 3 years, we have a net growth, unlike many European countries. I asked them why it is so, and we invested a lot of money. We had a big national program to support the younger generation to be interested in larger families, and it worked. There was not a single article here about it. And one guest of mine said, Sergey, what do you want? Good news about Russia doesn't sell. And it's disappointing, but it's real fact. And that certainly creates the atmosphere in this country about Russia that is not helpful to us, and that's difficult to deal with working here in the States. Moreover, we see how demonized Russia is here, and unnecessarily so, and untruthfully. We have differences with the United States. That's real fact. We had Cold War where everything was almost simple, clear cut. You have one camp against the other, and the discipline of the deterrence, the nuclear deterrence. It was much simpler. However, I wouldn't like to return to that kind of simplicity. Currently, what we see that after 24 years after the end of the Cold War, 25 maybe, we haven't been able to build a world where everybody, including us, feels safe and comfortable enough to be relaxed about the future of the country. I'll tell you that, say, in Europe, when we ended the Cold War, we decided to withdraw forces from Germany, Czech Republic, Poland. Our understanding was, and it was confirmed to us by our American counterparts, that there will be no expansion of NATO. And look where NATO is today. Look at what is happening during the last 2 years, where NATO is moving assets towards our borders. We see the ballistic missile defense being deployed around Russia, everywhere, in Europe and in the East, and we have physicists. I used to be one. We have excellent specialists, and we understand how these things evolve, and we understand that that kind of program can challenge the nuclear deterrence that is still something even after 25 years of the end of the Cold War, is guiding our mutual relations. And all of these challenges certainly met in Russia with the readiness to beef up our ability to withstand the pressure. And it doesn't certainly serve building relaxing and positive relations with the United States and with the West. Everybody now is talking about disagreements over Ukraine, and if there is interest, I certainly will deal with this in more detail. But I would underline that the worsening of relations started significantly earlier. And it wasn't because of us. You remember Magnitsky Law, the atmosphere around Russia on the eve of the Olympics. By the way, we won the Olympics. Then Snowden affair and many others. So we have developed a sense that in as much as Russia became more and more self-reliant and capable to defend their own views and their own interests, the more pressure was exerted on us. It's disappointing because instead of that, we could have built something that would be based on partnership in building security and building it on really inclusive basis, something that we are missing in Europe absolutely with NATO. Taking up the space, with NATO defining the security for membership of NATO the way they want, and the rest needs to take it as the ultimate truth for Europe. We do not rely on wisdom of NATO Council in ensuring security of Russia. So that's one factor. Secondly, in economics, unfortunately, during all these years, we haven't been able to build a real economic network of partnerships and cooperation. I have already spoken to this issue today. At the highest point in our trade relations, our trade reached $39 billion a year, according to American statistics, and 29 according to Russian statistics. The statistics are different, but it doesn't matter because whatever you take, it's so low. It's less than 1% of your foreign trade, and it doesn't put the United States on the list of most important trading partner for Russia, which in turn means that the relations between the societies, I'm not just talking about the ability of the governments to talk to each other, but relations between the societies are minimal. And I believe personally that the benefits of economic interaction are not only that people are getting richer and making money, create jobs, it's also creating understanding between people, understanding what they are. I would always underline what is important, understanding of what they are not. Because currently what we see happening is demonization of Russian president, and beyond that, there is no significant analysis of what Russia is developing into. Russia is, I would like to underline, a modern and developing economy. You need to remember that we, as a market economy, exist only 24 years. Out of these 24 years, maybe first 4 or 5 years, we were still struggling on how to start building the economy. There were different versions of it. One of them, for example, was called 500 Days. There was a program that was pushed by the liberal economists in Russia, suggesting that the whole economy that was owned by the state on behalf of the people in the Soviet Union will be transformed in fully operational market economy within 500 days. It's certainly so naive, but they believe that if we do allow the market to decide everything for us, everything will settle rather fast. It certainly didn't work. It doesn't work in any country, let alone such big a country like mine. But one way or another, the privatization was undertaken, and it was so painful a process you cannot imagine, because you just need to try to imagine a big country where the state owned everything had to transform in an economy where things that belong to the state would start belonging to people. How you divide the national pie? How you make people understand that taking a share of the pie, they take also responsibility to develop it. They take upon themselves responsibility for jobs, for protection of your people. In a system where for 70 years we lived in a different mentality. So we have gone through enormous change, sometimes painful, sometimes less so. And I'm proud of what we have been able to achieve as a modern society with significant development of economy, where the income of people doubled and sometimes tripled during these years. We are self-reliant on many things. And we have grown to the 6th or 7th largest economy in the world. But there are certainly drawbacks in Russian economy that we all recognize. And one of them, and most probably the most difficult for us now, is overdependence of sales of oil and gas. And you know, we had developed so many programs to diversify economy years ago. We wanted to invest and to encourage investment in high technologies, which are in abundance in Russia. We have very good universities, we have very good brains, we have excellent school of mathematics, most probably one of the best, if not the best in the world. We have excellent school of physics. As a former physicist, I'm proud of it, and a physicist. And the problem is that all of this was confined in the walls of universities and research institutions. People who were developing new knowledge were not interested in making it a product that could be sold on the market. And it's a kind of mentality that had to be changed. And it's painful. We see new generations of Russians coming into the market. And I see more and more people are willing and already know how to do it. And I'm rather comfortable in thinking about the future. And I always underline that Russia is a great country, not only because of its history, but because of its future. So the economy in Russia is in a difficult situation as a result of world economic situation, where the growth of our major trading partners is not in a very bright situation, the Europeans being the biggest trading partner for us. Even Chinese, who are now second, our partner in terms of the volume, also slow down the growth, and that certainly affects the markets in a way that is painful to Russia. But I've heard a number of Russian businessmen who say that that kind of challenge and the time of test of the economy is a time of opportunity for them. And there is a growing understanding that we need not just to talk about diversifying our economy, we need to do that. And it's being done. I would say that during last years we saw a lot of things that are encouraging. We have a program that is encouraging investment in industries that would replace the need to import things from abroad as a result of sanctions. We have to do it, and we will, and that helps diversification of the economy very, very well. We see, because of these sanctions and counter-sanctions, that the Russian agriculture is rising so fast, 14% a year, which is very good, and Russian producers were not able to sell their products because the market had been taken years ago by traditional exporters from the States as well, because the United States were selling a lot of meat and chicken to Russia. Now, the Russian agriculture business is developing very, very fast. even in today, in a very difficult period of time, we see that the flow of capital from Russia has reduced significantly. Last year it was, I think, $56 billion. But it's not a flow of capital. It's payment by Russian private companies for the loans that have been taken in the West in the past, which is good. Certainly the market has dealt a big blow on Russian currency. It has become significantly lower as opposed to dollar and euro. But there are some things that are not obvious to normal person who are not economists. But I understand how the people, at least here, are economists, so you would easily understand it. For normal Russian living in Russia, who doesn't spend their vacations in the fashionable resorts in France, in Alps, or in Monaco, they leave paying for stuff in rubles. So for them, the rate of exchange is not that important. What is important for them is inflation. Certainly, the drop in the exchange rate does create an additional factor of inflation, but it's not that high, and we certainly will manage pretty well. And moreover, even on the backdrop of the current situation on the markets of oil and gas, in terms of sheer volume, we haven't decreased the size, we have increased. And in terms of rubles that we got, it's not that big a blow as could have been predicted from outside. However, one certainly need to be honest with ourselves. We have significant difficulties in borrowing money as a result of sanctions, but that doesn't change too much the whole situation on the market. There were estimations that the effect of the sanctions is no more than 1.5% of overall problems that the world market creates for us. But I would like to tell you a couple of things about the sanctions, not the impact, but what it is and how it changed perception, including in Russian-American relations. The sanctions were introduced for political reasons. If you are interested, we will discuss the substance. We're talking about the mechanisms. And what is happening that the US government and some European countries as well decided that they can easily freeze assets of people or companies. We all, in the Bretton Woods system, trusted the United States to be guardians of the system of the World War II. And the first time the United States failed us all was when you decided, I think it was under President Nixon, that from the moment of announcement on, the United States are not going to have the gold backup of the dollars, which was huge, I think, at the time. The whole system was based on the notion that you can come to American bank, bring your dollars, and get some amount of gold. That was the premise of the whole system. Under the Nixon administration, there was a decision that you cancel all of this, and the system has changed. So you flooded the world with dollars, and you were in a position to do so. But currently, people are asking, including Russia, how can you rely on this system in the future if it can be manipulated so easily for reasons that have nothing to do with economics? And I always, when I speak to my American friends who deal with Russian-American relations, challenge them to meet me in 10 years to discuss this. But you can see that BRICS countries, these 5 major developing economies, have agreed to launch their first common bank. It's beginning $100 billion worth of capital. They agreed to bring together the national reserves, also creating a foundation that will be helpful to guarantee the economic development of the countries involved. You might see that our Chinese friends have insisted on their currency to become a new exchange, recognized exchange instrument. The Chinese friends of ours launched their own bank that would be a very significant factor in the Asian space, and we are part of it. And some of American allies chose to join immediately as well. I saw even some agreements between countries other than Russia that decide to trade in currency other than dollar. All of these are the results of the psychological change in appreciation as to how you can work in a financial environment where things can be manipulated for political reasons. And I'm trying to cut it off. One last point on economics. When we started building market economy in Russia, we were told by our World Bank friends, American friends, Europeans, that we need to be integrating ourselves into globalization processes that were kind of panacea, considered to be panacea of all the problems in the world. Free trade, unimpeded access to markets, predictability of trade relations and investment. Where is it all? By the way, I checked recently the magazines, United States magazines on economics, and I didn't find a single article, maybe I haven't read enough, that would be promoting the idea of globalization. What is happening now, the United States is building a new partnership with the Asian countries. Next will be a new partnership with the Europeans. So as far as I'm concerned, multi-economic commerce is fragmentation of the economic ties rather than globalization.
So having you here expressing your authentic experience to a room full of folks, it's just a rare opportunity, it's a privilege. You said a whole lot, Mr. Ambassador, and so I'm going to go back and pick up on a couple of things in there, and then I've got some cards that have some questions that Pat, Ryan, and I worked on earlier, but there are also cards that are around the audience, and so he'll come around and pick them, so hold them up as you go. First, the demonization that sells papers. I'm sorry about that. But I think
So am I.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I am the Associate Provost for Interdisciplinary Studies and Global Education, and so I'm the administrative officer who is charged with helping to move the institution forward with the internationalization of how we think, how we behave, what the curriculum is like, to grow study abroad. We're not going to work on a study abroad to Russia. And so I'm here professionally, but when you were talking, it brought me back to the core of who I am as a human being. And I'm a mother. I have a 27-year-old daughter who works internationally, and I have a 26-year-old son who's a naval officer who is stationed in Mediterranean and in the Arabian Sea, that area. And so I was thinking back to the early times with my hands over my head, and also about something that a counselor friend of mine told me many years ago. The very root of all human motivation is, there are two ways that these things are spurned on. One is love and one is fear. And I think that so much of what goes on among countries and heads of state and business people, all these kinds of things, is fear, trying to protect the piece of the pie, if you will. And so I think that the pie is plenty big, and there are plenty of problems to work on in this big old world, and perhaps the balance that we try to keep is important for the other countries that are trying to ascend in that balance kind of sphere. So I've got the first question here, coming after all of that, and it fits right in with the earlier comments you were saying, is do you believe that we're facing a new Cold War? Did we just warm up a little bit and now we're going back the other direction? What do you think about that, Mr. Ambassador?
I think I'm a little bit elder.
Just a little.
A little bit. That big.
You're the
Yeah.
physicist.
And I've lived here in the States during Cold War. The first time I came to the States was in '78, and in '81 I was already posted in New York. And I spent at that time 8 years in the States, both in New York and Washington. And I remember this time, and how difficult it was, and how unfriendly it was. And I'm asked, and I'm frequently asked, whether we are back to the Cold War. And I say with full conviction, no, we are not. And the main reason is that the Cold War relations, the Cold War structures of international relations, were based on ideological divides. And these divides are no longer. So there is no basis for the Cold War. But the fear that you alluded to is something that is very important. I would call it differently. For many, especially the elder generation, the fears of the past is what I call default mode when they think about Russia. So if something is less than understandable in Russia and Russian actions, or something that is not in line with what the United States believe is right for Russia, people like in computer mode fall in default. And default is the one that we have inherited in the Cold War. And here is the thing. As a result of it, the coverage in the press, in the debates, political debates, is based on this default mode and not the real assessment of what we are and what we are not. I'm talking about the situation here. If you go to Russia, I would say you also would feel a lot of sentiments that maybe wouldn't be liked in America about America. But there are good reasons for that. However, there are also sometimes extremes. But I would claim that the average Russian, especially the younger generation, knows about America significantly more than average American knows about Russia. And not because we are smarter, but because people are interested. And here in the States, you live a little bit different life. Your foreign policy is a kind of extension of your internal political debates. You are focused on internal things. You believe that the United States has a right to exert the leadership in everything and everywhere is something that sometimes creates problems. Sometimes very painful problems to many nations. You believe that you are exceptional. I wouldn't contest this notion because we are also exceptional. The difference being, we do not impose our exceptional views on others, and you do. That's our perception. You might agree, you might disagree. So, what I'm trying to say, as a result of these perceptions, what is similar to me to the Cold War time is the information that is being flown here in the States about Russia, about what we are, what we are not. And that is, I would say, information Cold War. It's there. Maybe not as mature as it was in the real Cold War times, but basically otherwise, I do not see any reason why Cold War, in the terms of what it existed in the past, can be resurrected. Because there are no ideological divides. What is happening is that the world is changing. And the sense of exceptional place of the United States sometimes is a little bit, with due respect to your country, that is a great country, is a little bit of the deceptive. The world is changing. There are other centers of not power, economic development. Take a look at China. Take a look at the Asian countries which are developing so fast. You'll see more of that in Latin America and sometimes maybe in Africa. So the United States also has to do that. The fact that you are kind of retracting now from the globalization where you felt that you were enjoying the best positions economically in the world is reflective of the changes and understanding in this country that you need to ensure the interest of the United States with different estimates. So we believe that we all can build a relations system in the world that would be more, I call it balance. Balance is a fact from the past. But balance of interest, yes. Yes, and that's something that can be done. But returning to your question as to are we back in the Cold War, I hope not.
Thank you. I'm going to abandon the free-form questions and go right to y'all. There are a lot of talking here about possible U.S. ground operations against ISIS in Iraq and Syria. Since Russian forces are already active in Syria, here we go. Do you think that U.S. anti-ISIS operation will result in better relations and cooperation with Russia, or quite the opposite?
We have official permission, or rather invitation, from the Syrian government to go there. We went there because the threat of terrorism is a threat that we consider is number one for Russia. It's a threat to you and to others, but you are hiding behind oceans from the region where it is
We can't
developing.
help that.
No, you can't. We live next by.
No.
And we have already had so many instances where on our territory that are reflective of the biggest problem that we can have if ISIL is permitted to continue. We even had some attempts in the southern Russia to start building the Holy Caliphate in Russia when we were fighting it in Chechnya against the terrorists that were supported by our Sunni friends from the south. So it's something I think that most probably is has to unite us because it's a global challenge. It's a challenge to us all, and it's a challenge to each of us. So far, to my great disappointment, the United States chose not to join in any joint efforts there. But joint that doesn't mean that we have to mount a single army composed of different national battalions. What I'm talking about is that we do the job of fighting terrorism, and it's not only ISIL and Nusra, it's Al-Qaeda, and it's as dangerous as ISIL, however, maybe less organized. So far we haven't been able to establish kind of cooperation that certainly is needed in order to be effective fighting a common enemy. When it comes to the ground forces, I'm not sure I know that the United States are sending ground forces there. We are not. We help only the Syrians fighting the terrorists from the air. So far you also do the same. I understand that you are planning to send some troops, but not in combatant role, but in training the local people. And I think there is a vast field for, if not cooperating, but at least coordinating our efforts, because we do address the same challenges that is threatening you and us. And for us, it's even more immediate because, according to several estimates, we have about 3,000, maybe plus minus, nobody knows the exact number, of Russian citizens who went there. Some of them have already returned. They're trying to recruit many more in Russia. We know it, we are fighting it. Our law enforcement is system is focused on this issue on a daily basis. And we have many more Russian speakers there from countries of former republics of the Soviet Union. For example, the spillover of this problem to our neighbors, with whom we do not maintain protected borders, can be also affecting our security, let alone the security of our friends and neighbors. So it's a huge problem, and we can do, when I say we, I mean you and us, can do much better if we work in harmony, I would say, in other ways.
Here we have about 8 minutes, so I'm just going to see what, that's a two-part question, so let's get to one that might be one part. What is your vision for U.S.-Russian relations for what it could be? What practical steps can be taken to move it forward? There's a nice question.
It is nice, and it's a nice question, but difficult answer to it. You know,
I have an answer.
could you
Right
share?
out here. To do this in Russia.
You're right.
It's the future.
You're
The
right in the basics of it. Understanding. A lack of understanding of what we are and what we are not is one of the biggest problems that increases the difficulties that we might have otherwise. And lack of interaction between the societies, economies, lack of dialogue, not only on the level of the government, but also on the level of normal people. Even in the Soviet Union times, in the Cold War, we had delegations from the Senate of the United States coming to us to speak to the counterparts in Russia, and Russian senators would go to the United States to discuss. The Supreme judges had regular consultations. I went to Alaska, and the people are complaining that they had so many neighborhood ties with Russian Far East. All of this is gone. Not all, but almost everything is gone. We had a commission that was created by President Obama and then President Medvedev, Russian-American Presidential Committee that was called for to supervise the building of the tissue of economic and other relations between our two countries. There were 20 working groups, co-chaired on both sides by cabinet and sub-cabinet level. Decision of the United States was to discontinue the commission. And all these wonderful ideas that have been discussed are gone. We have decided for ourselves that we will keep open the avenue for dialogue, but we are not going to walk around Washington begging for one. But when the United States is ready to deal with serious issues with us, on the basis that I described, we are there to help.
Here we go. What is your opinion as to what the United States will do once Ukraine fails to satisfy the terms of the Minsk Agreement by not amending the Ukrainian constitution to federalize the DNR and LNR and grant them greater autonomy?
That was the question that was written by real specialists. Because that's the core problem in the Ukrainian settlement. And if you allow me a couple of additional minutes for that, because
Sure.
that's important. And I was expecting the question. What happened in Ukraine? And I give you our view of this. Of course, you might agree or disagree. What happened in Ukraine 2 years ago was a forceful coup, and the president that was dutifully, democratically elected was overthrown by force against any rules, any constitutional requirements. It was done by force. Not all the Ukrainians accepted this change, because the change occurred as a result of the actions by nationalists, basically from the West. I'm not suggesting that people who went to Maidan to protest policies that they didn't like were nationalists. They were normal people who were disenchanted by the president, but they went there in peaceful fashion. They were protesting, they were singing songs, they were praying together, but these were peaceful people. But then we saw infiltration of this crowd by well-organized people, organized in hundreds, with protective gear, with the baseball bats, with Molotov cocktails, who started throwing it all of this on police, and police wasn't responding for so long. And by the way, the position of the U.S. government was to help prevent the use of force by the government. And they did behave very, very reasonably in this fashion. Can you imagine, for example, a situation where in the United States the demonstration will be throwing Molotov cocktails on American police? What would have happened? But they lost people. A lot of policemen were burned, and this crowd, not the peaceful people who initially went to Maidan, helped to overthrow the president. In Crimea, where a majority of people are Russians, they couldn't accept this change, because it's not just a change of person, it's a change of direction that Ukraine is taking. In the southern eastern Ukraine, it was the same, but maybe to a less extent. The Crimeans, they decided, and it was a decision by the parliament that was elected in Ukraine in the constitutional procedures. They decided that they want to go independent. And they were autonomous republic. They had a lot of power to do so. And they decided to go independent, and later on they decided to become part of Russia. So we embraced them. And there is a lot of fantasies about Russian annexation. It wasn't annexation. It was us embracing people who were afraid to be under threat because of the nature of the forceful change in Kiev. And there were a lot of reasons for that. Because the nationalists at that time promised the so-called friendship trains to be sent to Crimea. Friendship trains is from our history. When we send friendship trains to socialist countries, filled with students, musicians, they will be making friends, and that was quite a wonderful event for the younger generation of the countries involved. So they were sending friendship trains filled with tanks, with weapons. It's not friendly, and it wasn't meant to be friendly. There were many other things that were happening at the time that certainly, especially the nationalists, when they came to power, one of the first draft law that they adopted was to ban the use of Russian language. Mind you, it has never become a law because of the pressure of others, because it's so un-European. But that was the message of the nature of the change that occurred in this country. So we all saw the developments there. Currently we have a collective effort to bring peace there. We are trying to be helpful because we want Ukraine to be peaceful and in peace with itself. The two republics in the east, they are not taking decisions to secede from Ukraine. They proposed the change in constitution that would allow them to continue in Ukraine. But because of the changes that had occurred there, they wanted more autonomy. So the agreement, the Minsk agreement, that was concluded does involve all three, and there are many more, commitments by Ukrainian governments or obligations in order to make the implementation of Minsk Agreement a constitutional change that would grant special status to these two republics, the amnesty for the people who governing these republics, and elections that would be conducted based on Ukrainian law, but specifically corrected for the situation in this part of Ukraine, and what is important, in consultations with authorities of Donetsk and Luhansk republics. Now I'm counting in reverse order. No consultations have taken place. Constitution has been changed in a way that is compatible with what is in the Minsk Agreement. The amnesty was adopted as a draft law but never came into force. And there are many other things that the Ukrainian government has committed to implement and has never done. Now, what is going to happen if they continue on the same track? I don't know. When it comes to Russian-American relations, it's something that is less than reasonable and comfortable, because the U.S. government insists that the EU continue with the sanctions against Russia until Minsk Agreement is implemented. Ukrainians have all the reasons not to implement the agreement and to continue the Western pressure on Russia on this issue. It's mind-boggling that the sanctions and the pressure on Russia is dependent on the Ukrainian decision whether they want or not to implement the Minsk Agreement. It's phenomenal. But it's also another characteristics of the current Russian-American relations, which is unfortunate.
Thank you. It's now a little after 7, and I think the last question will be, what is your favorite part about living in the United States?
Geographical or what?
I don't care. What's your favorite thing?
Talking to people. Yeah, I love it. And I love the way Americans communicate. People are honest, very easygoing, sometimes very thoughtful, sometimes with reduced interest in what is happening outside of the United States. Put it mildly.
I don't even know what's happening inside the United States.
What is important that when they start talking to you, they engage very substantively. And problem is not with the Americans, it's when Americans come together as Americans.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.